Hello? 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 I hope that's not going to be a problem for me. Hello? This was better.
Hello? I think we got it.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started now. We would like to stay on time, like we always do. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Welcome to tonight's candidate forum for the Riverton Mayor and the House District 55. One will follow right after the mayor's forum is completed. We'll have about a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and reconvene. I'm Linda Barton. I'm the chair of the League of Women Voters of Fremont County. The League is pleased to host a series of candidate forums during the 2022 election season. The League of Women Voters of Fremont County, Wyoming, is a nonpartisan grassroots organization and part of the state and national League of Women Voters. The League believes voters should play a critical role in democracy, and it encourages informed and active government participation. The League is dedicated to voter education and voting rights and providing information that helps voters make informed decisions at the polls. The League of Women Voters of Fremont County was founded in the winter of 2020, so we're a very new organization. And we did that with a group of local citizens who wanted to promote our free and open election process. Community members come together and determine the questions that are being asked this evening. Set that down for a minute. The League does not support or endorse any candidate running for office. The League distributes unbiased information, candidate information, through our election guide, which is over there on the desk. Plus, everyone should have received one in the mail because we sent one out to every household in Fremont County. As a matter of fact, we sent out 18,000 to households in Fremont. Our Be a Voter Guide informs the citizens of Fremont County of many ways to register to vote and how to request an absentee ballot. And I will tell you right now that Margie Irvine from the county clerk's office will be out in the foyer until 6:30. If you need to register or change your party or whatever you need to do, she will be available until then. Copies of both of our Be a Voter Guide, I'm sorry. These publications are available at the entrance table. If you want to add your name to our listserv, please sign up at our information table. And please visit our Facebook page, Fremont County League of Women Voters, for information about our local elections, election guide, and candidate forums, as well as other pertinent information as it becomes available. Additional forums include this Sunday, October 16th, for House District 33 at the Frank B. Weiss Center in Fort Washakie. It's 3 Ethity Road at 5:30 p.m. And on Monday, we will host another House District 35 at the Lander Library, Carnegie Room, which will also, doors will open at 5:30 and forums will start at 6. Both of which will be live streamed as this one is this evening. YouTube channels of County 10, WYO Today, and the League's website will host the live streaming. I think both the media companies are live streaming it now, and then we'll have it available on our website at the end of tonight. We want to thank our County Clerk Julie Fries and the Fremont County Election Office staff for providing guidance and information over the past few months and for registering voters. Thanks goes again to the Forum Committee, made up of our community members, for their counsel and time. Ernie Over for moderating this forum this evening, WYO Today Media, and County 10 for hosting our forum videos. I would also like to thank the Fremont County Library System for allowing us to use all of their facilities at no cost. And they've been wonderful partners, and I suggest you go to the library as often as possible. Finally, we want to thank the candidates for running for office. It is not easy and it takes a lot of effort. We welcome you and we wish you well in your campaigns. With that said, please welcome our moderator for tonight's forum, Ernie Over, who will discuss the guidelines and begin tonight's events. So let's go ahead and get started, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Linda. As Linda just told you, my name is Ernie Over, and I am the forum moderator this evening. As the editor and news director of YO Today Media's radio network and yotoday.com, I'm eager to provide voters with more in-depth information about the candidates. Our goal for this forum is to give candidates time to share their thoughts and their ideas with voters. Tonight we have two candidates running for Riverton Mayor, the current Mayor, Richard Gard, and current Fremont County Chief Deputy and Prosecuting Attorney, Timothy Hancock. This forum is being live streamed, as Linda said, by YO Today YouTube and County 10, and will be available on YO Today, County 10, and the Fremont County League of Women Voters website, so you can look at it once again if you need some clarification. Now, let me share with you the format for tonight's forum. I want to give you a sense of what you'll see and make certain that the candidates also know what the evening will hold. First, we'll begin with each candidate offering a prepared 2-minute opening statement. Then we'll follow with a number of questions submitted to and vetted by community members. Each candidate has 1.5 minutes to respond. The candidate who answered first will have a 30-second rebuttal period. When the candidates have 15 seconds remaining, Marlon will raise the sign, right? You want to raise the sign, see what it looks like? Okay, there's the sign she'll raise, and we'll alternate leads for each question. In advance, thank you, candidates, for agreeing to adhere to the time limits. The next section of the forum will be the one-word lightning round. Each candidate will be given one word or phrase and 15 seconds to respond to that word. Candidates may give a one-word response or use as many words as they want to fill the 15 seconds. Each candidate will be given a total of 4 words. The idea with this round is to hear what associations each candidate makes when given a simple word. Following those questions, we'll have 2 audience questions. Audience members are asked to write down a question by the end of the 3rd question during the 2nd session of the forum here. I will make an announcement to the audience when volunteers are ready to collect those questions. Volunteers will review and choose 2 questions for the audience question round. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond, with a 30-second rebuttal from the candidate who responded first. Finally, each candidate will have 2 minutes to present an unprepared closing statement. And I'm confident here you'll hear things tonight that will align with your thoughts and things you disagree with. I'll ask the audience present to refrain from reacting to the candidates' comments so they can remain focused on their message. Linda, I forgot to ask you if we had a coin flip to see who goes first. Do we? Okay, let's go with the mayor first with your opening statement, then Mr. Hancock.
I would like to thank the League of Women Voters and the moderator, Ernie. I appreciate your setting up this forum. I would like to thank the citizens of Riverton for working with me over the last 4 years. I would appreciate your vote on November 8th. I've lived in Riverton for the past 64 years. I've been married to my wife for 46 years, and we have 6 children, 20 grandchildren. I've worked at the same job for 50 years in a family business. During the COVID pandemic, I did my very best to keep Riverton open. This took hard work, a lot of time, and a willingness to lead. We have rebuilt an attitude and a usage for City Park. I was told by many that this could not be done, but with the help of the police and the citizens, we were able to make a big change. We went looking for ways to bring back businesses and jobs, and we did just that. We stopped businesses from moving out to moving in. We brought back a can-do attitude and a willingness to help ourselves to be a better place to live. We created more family-oriented activities. We put a tax in place to help fund a new hospital, to maintain our airport, ground transportation, and to help empower and better the lifestyle of our citizens. I have served on the City Council. I have been the chairman of the Fremont County GOP, and now as mayor, my personal cell phone has been given out. I return all calls or texts on a timely manner, and my door is always open. I have proven that I have the time and the experience to run the city of Riverton. Thank you.
Mr. Hancock, please. And again, let's hold our applause until the very end, please.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I appreciate it. It feels really weird to have this televised and not have people to look out. So I'm glad people are here. I'd be really feeling awkward. And it's good to see some friendly faces here. I have many people from my committee, my family, and I really appreciate your support. And it really just means the world to me. I am really blessed, just in general, to be here, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to seek out new ways to serve Riverton. I came back here a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, to get a job because of a job with the Fremont County Attorney's Office. And what a blessing it's been to serve our community in that capacity. I really believe that one of the things that's the most important for our citizens is safety. Being able to be in your home, being able to feel comfortable there, being able to feel like somebody has your back. And I think that's an important aspect of anything that we do with government. Of course, that's got to be balanced, as all things in life are, with freedom. So to be able to serve in that capacity has been great. And to be on the city council previously, I was on the city council from 2017 to 2020, and that has been a really good opportunity to see the functioning of the city and participate in it. As mayor, I firmly believe in two things that I want to focus on today, tonight, and just going forward. One of them is that we need to make sure that we're acting deliberately. And by that I mean when we're doing things, it's planned, it's discussed, the citizens are involved, and that's an important part of what I believe in. And the next thing is to be acting proactively. And I believe that's an important part of what government can do in terms of safety, in terms of what we're doing with weeds, what we're doing with police, all of it. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on a lot tonight and going forward. Thank you, everyone, for your attention, and I would appreciate your vote November 8th.
And again, the format, we'll go through a dozen questions, and the candidates have 90 seconds to answer, and then the first person who answers gets a 30-second rebuttal. And we'll start with Mr. Hancock. The question on general philosophy is this. In terms of running the city of Riverton, what is the role of the mayor? And as mayor, what would be your priorities?
So the city of Riverton runs a lot like a corporation in the sense that what we have is we have a council that is in charge of the big picture, in charge of everything going on. The mayor functions more like the chairman of the board. And then we've got the council that functions a lot like you would have a board for a corporation. And so for the day-to-day operations, the actual running of the city, for the most part, is going to be done by the city administrator and the city staff. So what's important as mayor and as the council is really setting that vision for the city. Where do we want to go? What things are needed? And that's got to require looking ahead and thinking of what's going to be happening going forward, but also being reactive. I think Riverton has done an excellent job of responding to things as they come up. I think we did that with COVID. We've done that with other things. But I think we could do better in terms of the vision I have for the city of being a little bit more proactive. We have an excellent master plan that was passed while I was on the council in 2019. sit down and read it. It's not that difficult to read. We have awesome ideas in there and great things that we can do going forward in terms of economic development, tribal partnerships, anything that we're going to be doing in the city. So being able to have that vision and being able to build a consensus with the council to see that vision actually come to pass, I think is the most important role of the mayor.
Okay, Mayor Guard, you have 90 seconds.
I think it's really important that we understand.
Microphone.
I think it's really important that we understand that being the mayor of Riverton, you've been elected to a position of real trust from the citizens of Riverton. And what we need to do is generate a trust between those individuals that they can actually speak to you on a daily basis, that you're part of the community, that you interact, that you find yourself willing to go out and to participate in the activities that are there for the community. We've had, since I've been mayor, we've had some wonderful opportunities to do that. Kicking trash, our Rendezvous Park activities, the harvest festivals, things that we've just really put back into place and made it so that the families can feel like there's an opportunity for them to participate. We'd like more participation in council meetings. They're at times pretty skinny, but we try to listen to everybody that comes in, and we try to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to speak and to be heard. And in doing so, that makes the mayor's opportunity that we can hear what needs to be done. Thank you.
Any rebuttal, Mr. Hancock?
No, thank you.
Okay, the next question goes to Mayor Guard. What role do you think strategic planning should play in guiding the city staff to do their work?
Well, strategic planning is a great idea, and we do that. We do go out and buy professionally studies that tell us how to take care of the parks and master plans. Those are really good, but they can put us in a place where the last master plan, it came back and we were going to plant hundreds of more trees in City Park. And so I could look across the room and the police chief's countenance just fell over the fact that there's just that many more trees to hide behind. So we had to put it into play in our own situation. And that's once again where the citizens come in. We have to go out, have those conversations so that we know what the citizens want, what they're going to do, how they'd like to do that. And as we formulate that, we can use that strategic planning as a starting point. And that starting point has to be able to move and to adapt to what we think that people need. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hancock?
So we are, in our city, we have some amazing people that are on our city staff. Ernie, you're there at the meetings. You see just how amazing it is to see the work that they do, how just capable they are, and how well they do at things. But the reality is, being able to have that plan, that vision, that strategy going forward, and making sure that it's communicated to council and that there's that focus and that direction is extremely important. And I think it's something we can do better at, just flat out is. As I said, we've got an incredible master plan, as I mentioned. And, you know, talking about the trees, for example, yes, we want trees. How do we take care of the trees? Well, in the master plan, to make sure we don't have a place people can hide behind, you make sure that it's trimmed up to about 6 to 8 feet. It's all these things and balancing and trying to figure out ways we can make sure that what we have is used in a way that's intelligent but also inviting. And so being able to go back to that, I think, is important. When I was on the council, we actually did very well at goal setting every year. And I don't know that we've done as well at that in the most recent years. We've had a lot of goals that have stayed the same. And I think going back and looking at that again and seeing what we can change or add, I think would be important and give that direction to the staff.
Any rebuttal, Mr. Guard?
No.
Okay. So this question goes to Mr. Hancock. What would you propose and support for future revenue and economic development in the city?
So I feel like I'm beating a dead horse when we talk about the master plan, but it's really incredible some of the things that we have. Some of the things I've been talking about have been, number one, trying to really regain our status as the rendezvous city. Being able to have that central location that we have is going to really help us to be able to invite other people to be here. So we have to go out and we have to take advantage of that. Figure out what we have that will attract conventions and sporting events here, and take advantage of that and use that. And that's, of course, going to help with more revenue coming because we're going to have people coming here. They're going to be spending money. They're going to be contributing to the tax base. So that's a part of that, and that's just one thing. I've talked about economic development as well in terms of being able to figure out where money is bleeding from the community. People in Riverton have many opportunities to spend their money in other locations, whether it's neighboring towns, Casper, Cheyenne, or Amazon, whatever the case may be. And so figuring out where that money is bleeding and being able to encourage businesses that provide that service that's otherwise going out of the city can do a lot to contribute to the economic development of Riverton. And I think that's where we can really focus our efforts when it comes to making sure that we encourage those businesses to thrive.
Okay. Mr. Guard?
Economic development is a really tough thing to sponsor, but we need to have that goal in mind. And there's a lot of opportunities. We've done them. We've put them back in place. When I came into being the mayor, we had a very poor economic record, and people were leaving the city of Riverton. If you remember, the Maverick store completely took down its store and left. And so what we've tried to do is help to support and sustain local businesses and see what the local businesses need and what we can do to increase volume. We brought in soccer tournaments, baseball tournaments. We brought in Kafaru, which was a Colorado company that is doing a wonderful job. They're going to have an activity this Saturday from 8 till 5 that they're going to teach all sorts of things, and it's free to the public. They took over a large building that was unoccupied on Sunset. They've brought 30 jobs already. They have the opportunity to bring almost 200 jobs, sewing jobs, to Fremont County. I think it's important that we don't just talk about those things, but we do them. I think that's the real act that needs to be done. Thank you.
Any rebuttal, Mr. Hancock?
I guess the only thing I would add, and I think the mayor's response was pretty good in this regard, but that takes making sure we're giving the direction and the vision. We have to make sure that the city staff knows this is where we need to be focusing, and I think we can always do better at that.
Okay. I have an announcement now for those of you who have audience questions. Someone will come around, Linda, I believe, and collect the questions that you have been writing. So hold them up in the air so she knows who has a question, and she'll come around and pick those up for you. All right, very good. Okay, now we will go on to Mr. Guard. There has been some criticism that the economic development tax has gone only to major projects. For example, $800,000 to the new hospital at the expense of smaller projects. Do you favor smaller organizations and projects over larger projects? And will you continue to use job creation in the application analysis?
Yeah, Ernie, I think that's a good question, and we're so fortunate to have the half-cent tax. We're one other county in the whole state of Wyoming that's put that in place. And so that half-cent tax generates about $1.6 million for the city of Riverton. And when it comes to recruiting and bringing people to Riverton, we have to have an airport. We have to have a college. We have to have a hospital. People don't want to come to a city that doesn't have a hospital that's functioning and operating. And so we need to have those in place. So when you say, do we favor larger businesses over smaller ones, the immediate answer is yes. In the initial setup, we're going to have to spend some really serious money to establish those items that we've lost. We've had a functioning hospital in the past. We don't have that. So that hospital, we did more than $800,000. We did $880,000, And we also, through citizens' help, suggesting to me that we might forego permits, we've added about another $96,000 to that. That's a drop in the bucket. It's short of $1 million, and that hospital is going to cost about $40 million. And so we need to make sure that we fund those items. And we will eventually get around to those smaller businesses. Thank you.
Mr. Hancock.
I think funding things like the hospital are essential. That is going to really make Riverton better. And I think it's going to help us regain a lot that I think we've lost over the last couple of years. But I do think that when you look at, on balance, for example, that $80,000 for the hospital, if they're asking for $800,000 and we're funding them over that, in theory, that's a great idea. But thinking of what that $80,000 could do for a small business, it could do a lot. And so, yes, we need to stay focused on the big things. We need to make sure that we have a functioning hospital here. But I think we need to make sure we also remember that a lot of people in Riverton, their livelihood is a small business. And there's nothing small about that. And we need to still show them the support they need.
Okay. Mr. Guard, any rebuttal?
Yeah, I think that there's a difference in how we go out and attract businesses. It's difficult to go out and bring a small business in because small businesses are really run from the heart. An owner has to really put his heart and soul in those. A larger business like Kafaru has the ability to transfer assets and to move to our location. The hospital will be the same. It's gonna cost about $40 million for that, but those are the things that take help. So we'll try to do that.
All right. We go now again to Mr. Hancock. Under your leadership, what role and or financial support would your administration provide to the Central Wyoming Regional Airport in Riverton?
The Central Wyoming Regional Airport is essential. It's really what makes it so that a lot of people can do business not only in Riverton, but in all of Fremont County. Lander, for example, relies on it. They know that. They've been making sure that they contribute to the MRG and otherwise to the airport. But we still need to keep it going. We need to do what it takes to keep it going. Up until recently, that was something that was a bigger drain on our budget from the city perspective. And as the mayor indicated, it's been quite a blessing in terms of keeping that afloat to be able to have the half-cent sales tax. So we need to keep that. So I think one of the biggest things that we need to do is build that understanding with all of the local governments that we have here and really focus on making sure that they're contributing to it and recognizing the value that the airport has to the community in terms of Riverton, but also Fremont County. And so I think that's something we need to keep going. We need to make sure that it's properly funded. And I think that's something that's really going to require legwork, which I'm not going to razz on Mayor Gard about this. He usually does pretty dang good at that, I'll admit. But that needs to keep going, and we need to really build that understanding that the rising tide raises all ships, and we need to keep the airport afloat.
Okay. Mr. Gard.
Ernie, you and I have been trying to save the airport for years, and it seems like every time we fix the holes, another one appears. So we've been through shortages on pilots, co-pilots, gas increases. I was one of the original members of the FAST committee. You now sit on the FAST committee, and you do a wonderful job. We had to create Denver Air out of nothing, and so we have gone over and above to try to keep that airport working. Now, there's a lot of us that don't fly. That's just the reality. We don't use that airport. But if we want second day, first day air, that's how those things work. The farmer who has a $300,000 tractor out in the field can't live without that tractor, right? And that tractor has to be functioning, and he needs parts. So the doctor who comes to Riverton and brings his wife from a metropolitan area has to have the ability to reach out from that. and do other work and go other places. That airport's used more by the county than by Riverton. And the other thing that most of us don't understand is that airport costs Riverton somewhere between $600,000 to $300,000, and it still is every year, year in and year out. We fund that. The MRG is only the one that is funded by the half cent.
Mr. Hancock, any rebuttal?
I guess not so much rebuttal, but just adding to it. There's a lot that I guess as just a regular consumer that we might not understand in terms of the usage of the airport. It is used far more than you could ever guess. Even sit down and talk to Job Corps. That's how they get their students here. And if we really want to be doing something that's going to be encouraging businesses to be willing to move here, we need that airport.
Okay. The next question for Mr. Guard. How do you approach our public safety and law enforcement policing?
Well, I go for rides with them. I do that, and I appreciate the officers. I am amazed at our officers, and we have an excellent police force. It's one of the most well-funded and the most officers on staff. So how do we keep that going? It's a difficult thing to do. We live on the edge of a reservation. We live in the biggest city. One thing that we lose track of is Riverton is the economic hub of Fremont County. We have Walmart, we have Sutherland's, we have Murdoch's. This is the economic center of Fremont County. We don't need to pay attention as much to leakage as we are the leakage of everybody's coming to Riverton, and we need to prepare to do that. And so with that said, the purpose of that is that if we keep that in mind, we have the opportunity to continue to grow and make those things happen right here in Riverton. If we don't pay attention to that, if we don't take care of the small businessman, and that's what I did. I went to every business during COVID, encouraging them to stay afloat and to stay open. And we've seen what's happened to that. We're still struggling with that, without finding employees to run those businesses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Hancock?
Could you repeat the question for me, Ernie? I want to make sure I got you right.
Sure. How do you approach our public safety and law enforcement policing?
That's, of course, a subject that's near and dear to me because that's what I deal with during the day. That's my day job. We have a very good police force. We have excellent law enforcement around Fremont County. And the most important thing is to make sure that they are going to stay. Although we have excellent police officers, we find ourselves in a situation where we frequently train somebody, we get them to a point where they can handle going to a bigger department, and then they go to the bigger department. We spend a lot of our money training people, sending them through the academy, and then they leave. So we need to do things to attract and keep our officers here. I think some of that might help with, of course, salary. Some of it helps with training. Some of it helps with equipment. Sit down sometime and talk about what's going on with the police department. We don't have the special response team anymore. Some of our equipment in terms of flash grenades or CS gas, all of that, it's beyond the expiration date. So we need to be cognizant of those needs, and we need to make sure those needs are met with the police department. So yes, I think we pay our police department. It's a big part of our budget. Look at the budget. It's 15% more than that. But we need to make sure that we do what we can to keep that going, because when it comes to the future and economic development and growth, we need safety.
Any rebuttal, Mr. Gard?
Yeah, that is a $3.8 million budget to that line item. Since I've been the mayor, we've put ballistic shields back in our cars. We've replaced the ARs. We've replaced the pistols. The police department is near and dear to my heart, and we take really good pride. They are the very best staffed in the entire state. We're one officer down at this current location. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hancock, the next question is for you. Should the city increase penalties for dog owners who habitually allow their dogs to roam free?
Well, I love dogs. I have 2 dogs. And I'm going to tell you, if I have problems with my dogs, I do what I can to take care of my problems with my dogs. That's what you do as a citizen. I will tell you that the way that we already have is that we have pretty stiff penalties for that. If a dog bites a person, the dog can be put down. So if they're a vicious dog, of course, that's a possibility. It's not pleasant, but it can happen. If the dog's getting out a lot, you do have an ongoing way that the fines can continue. The court has the opportunity to have those fines continue to go up in the discretion. So yes, I think that's a good idea. I think as I've been going door to door, I have heard people talking about dogs as being a problem at times. And so I think we need to do what we can to solve that.
Okay. Mr. Guard?
Dogs can be a problem, and we have grown to be a society that likes our dogs better than our children, and that's because the dogs are easier to tend than our children. And so as a result, we put a lot of time and effort in that. We do have a wonderful animal control officer. Shannon does a great job for the city of Riverton. There are people that take great exception to the work that's done there. We have some people that keep a large amount of cats, and we just work ourselves to death to try to make those things happen. Our police department is very well versed at how to do those things. We have the pause situation is very good in Riverton. We're fortunate to have that. Before we had pause, we were a kill station. Pause works really hard to place those animals all through the United States. They'll take animals clear to the East Coast. How do we take care of that? It goes back not to our officers. It's not our officers. We need to deal with that through the courts and get to a situation where we prosecute violators and make people responsible for what they've done.
Okay. Mr. Hancock, any rebuttal?
My dogs are more difficult to take care of than my children. I'm sorry.
Yeah, all right. Okay, Mr. Guard, your question. What is your vision for current public land and green spaces in Riverton? Is it adequate or should it be expanded?
Well, we just talked about this in staff Wednesday, and I was real surprised. We have just recently replaced the playground equipment in Sunset Park, and the people have absolutely loved that new playground equipment. And so, yeah, we need to pay attention to green space. If Riverton isn't a pleasant place to live, then we've missed the mark. And so the green space is absolutely important to us. Can we spend too much time on the green space? If you're running over potholes, the green space isn't as lovely. And so it takes a balance. But we have great green space. Our river walk is ideal. And we have a good partner in Idea Inc. that works with us to make those things happen. And so we're fortunate to have those opportunities. We have lots of other contributors that help us with our green space. If you look at our parks, I wish I could remember, it's thousands of acres that we mow. We just bought a 11-foot wide mower, and the thing cost $70,000 to buy that mower. And so with those things in place, we can make it pleasant and fun to be in Riverton. Thank you.
Mr. Hancock?
I think in terms of the amount of green spaces and the amount of parks that we have per residence, I think we're pretty good. In terms of what we do and how well we do at maintaining our parks, that's also important. As the mayor said, we want to make sure that we have a nice park. We can do better at that. We've got, it surprised me because I don't play tennis, but when I've gone door to door, I've had people talk to me and say, I want a tennis court that I can use. And we've kind of let some tennis courts just they are not usable anymore. So I think we could do a little bit better at when we have the spaces, making sure that we maintain it and make it so that it's going to be something people can use, and it's something that will be used. There's been talk, for example, about putting a basketball court in where we have the tennis courts in City Park. That's an excellent idea. Or whatever it is that we put there. I think there's been talk of also putting in a skate park there. If people are willing to put in the work, put in the time to be able to get something that is an additional amenity to our parks, I welcome it, and I think it's great. I think we could also do better. For example, I'm in City Park just about every week. And some of our sidewalks could use some work there. They get a little bit buckled, and it gets hard to be able to function and walk around. So I think our green spaces are great. I think we really need to work on making sure we're keeping them up. I think we're doing our best, but we can always do better.
Any follow-up, Mr. Guard?
Yes. City Park has been my pet project, and we worked really hard to make that a usable park again, and it has become that. Is it cured? No. It has problems. We're still working on those problems. We need to make sure that those parks are used. If we don't use them, somebody else will. And so we need to have those activities in those parks and make them work.
Thank you. Mr. Hancock, you have the next question. Would you work toward helping to make the community-wide Citizen Watch program sustainable? If not, why? And if so, what measures would you take?
So I think that movement to have more citizen involvement is very important. We need to have partnerships between the police and between the community. That's an important part of what can help. It's community-oriented policing, and it can really help, and it's just statistically, I didn't think that was a hard word until tonight. It statistically has been shown to improve safety in communities. So that sort of organization is great. What can we do to help it? Well, first off, we just need to make sure that whatever is going on with it, that we're supporting it. If there's training that needs to go along with it, making sure that the police department buys into it. I know, for example, I spoke with Carl Falcon the other day, he's actually in the back here, about the National Night Out. That's another great program that kind of ties into that, and making sure that we have law enforcement there and available and participating and supporting that. So in terms of a neighborhood watch or community watch, in conjunction with other community programs and community programs, police partnerships, that's all important. And it can really just pay dividends in our city in the future.
Okay. Mr. Guard?
Once again, this is something that we're doing, not talking about. We see the importance of Neighborhood Watch. The beauty of Neighborhood Watch is not to clean up the entire city, it's to take care of your 3 blocks. Get to know your neighbors again. Come out of your house. Do some things, have a block party. Be able to pick up the phone and be able to say, hey, somebody's walking down the alley, and you might be smart to take a look at what is happening there. We need to, as a society, learn to lock our cars and to take the guns out of the cars and to be responsible for our own actions. And the Neighborhood Watch puts all those questions out in front of us. The police have a busy job. They are designed to show up after the problem, right? And so the citizens need to get back in control in Riverton to take part of that. And that's, right now, I have to scat because at 7, there's a Neighborhood Watch meeting, and I'm the one pushing that. And so that goes right back to our graffiti. That goes right back to the way the parks are used. We had J.C. Park was vandalized over the weekend. We're looking at maybe having to take down the shelter because of that structure. That's what makes Riverton great, is when we get the citizens involved.
Any follow-up, Mr. Hancock?
Yes. The idea of a neighborhood watch has been talked about for years, and it's something that I think the reason it hasn't worked in the past when it's been brought up is because we really need the buy-in from citizens. So I'll agree with Mayor Gard about that. If you're wanting to make it work, if you're wanting to see this be something that's going to be helpful for the community, you need to be willing to show up, and you need to take steps. And I think even something as simple as a block party, excellent idea.
Okay, the next question is for you, Mr. Guard. Both Cafaro International, as you mentioned earlier, and the Riverton Medical District require a skilled workforce and commensurate housing. Given the City of Riverton's past attempt to address the problem of the high cost and low availability of housing, how do you propose to address this problem?
Once again, a question that's right where I live. So how do we do that? It's the chicken and the egg. We get the hospital to come to town. We need 140 employees. Where are they going to live? Cafaro comes to town, the exact same thing. We need to push back on government, and I've done a lot of that. We cannot keep driving the cost of housing through the roof. We need to make it possible for people to buy a house, to come to town, and to be part of Riverton. And so there's lots of opportunities for that. There's going to be more and more companies that want to move to Riverton, Wyoming, because we're doing things that attract them. They want to have the exact same things that we have. And so with that said, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be an always in balance that is out of balance. There isn't enough houses. There isn't enough jobs. Right now, we need more jobs for our. Riverton's been about 10,600 people for as long as I can remember, and we would look for that major employer, uranium, whatever we can put together. But what we need to do is make those things work hand in hand. Thank you.
Mr. Hancock?
I'm going to bring up the master plan again. You'll probably get sick of it, but part of what the master plan and part of what we passed in 2019 in terms of goals, I mean, we're not talking about something we're going to necessarily do everything with, but in terms of housing, being able to have a house is great. Being able to have houses is great. But we need to be receptive to the idea of also adding multifamily dwellings in Riverton. And it doesn't have to always be something that's huge and is like a quadplex or something like that, but even something that's duplexes or just trying to do things that we can use our space in a way that we've got housing that's not only for someone who has a $100,000 a year position, but for people that make a lot less than that. And so being able to have an apartment that you can rent that's going to be for somebody who makes less than that is really important, and it's what we're missing in Riverton. And that was already identified in 2019. So being able to encourage that, being able to make sure that we have spaces where that can go on, I think that's important.
All right. Mr. Gard, any follow-up?
Yes, please. We just changed some R4 zoning, and it's good to see that Mr. Hancock's changed his position on that. He sent out an email to all the council that he was opposed to R4 zoning in his neighborhood. We went ahead and passed that. And so can we make that work? R4, when you bring property into the city of Riverton, you decide what the zoning is. We don't. Right. Thank you.
All right. The next question now for Mr. Hancock. The city has a community services budget used to hire outside entities to provide services to the city. For example, Central Wyoming College runs the recreation program, and Paws for Life runs the animal shelter. Are there additional community needs in which the city could play a leadership and/or financial role?
As it stands, I think we do pretty well at helping out in the real essential services that we have that aren't exactly run by the city, but making sure that they can stay afloat. One of the organizations that I think is incredible that provides needed services in Riverton is Eagles Hope. We need to do what we can to make sure that they can provide that very niche area of either homeless or people that are struggling and trying to recover and need that transitional housing. So that's another program that I think is important. Of course, our recreation is incredible. I saw Mary Axthelm here earlier. There she is. And we need to be continuing to support that, especially where we don't have a recreation center like other places don't, or other places do. So I guess the one thing that I can say is I would always be receptive to additional services coming forward and saying, hey, this is an essential service. We really need assistance from the city. And I think we need to listen to their proposals and decide and make sure it's something that's going to be funded if it needs help from the city. So I guess that's the point that I'd make with it is being receptive to it and doing like we do now, which is having them come and present and tell us about what they're providing.
Yeah. Mr. Gard?
We fund about $300,000 in special purposes. And it's a tough thing to cover what we cover. And so Eagles Hope is a great opportunity for Riverton, and it's been funded well. R for Rec and that's one of my favorite places to spend money. And so the youth of Riverton is truly our future. And so we need to take care of those. Can the city continue to pay that much money out to special services? Maybe not. And so we are budget required to balance. And so we have to look at that every year. But we try to fund that. We've had to cut back in certain places that the police thought we weren't funded well and weren't giving the services back. And so that's a lot of money to pass out. I don't know. I don't encourage more people to come asking for money, Ernie, but if we need to, if they're good purposes, we need to do it. So we lost our Good Samaritans facility, and kindly the Eagles Hope has taken that over. But we lost that from our own health department. State health department came in and closed it because we didn't have sufficient plumbing for that facility.
Any follow-up, Mr. Hancock?
Yes, I neglected to mention something important, which is one of the biggest things that I think could help Riverton with a lot of the issues that we deal with in terms of crime, homelessness, addiction, is an inpatient treatment center. Now, is that something that the city can completely fund from the get-go? No. But is it something that I'm interested in as a community service? Yes, and I think it would be very helpful for our community.
All right, thank you. Mr. Guard, the next question is for you. The city oversees many infrastructure projects, such as the construction on Sunset, which was delayed and was over budget. How would you complete this project and avoid a similar situation in the future?
Well, I don't know that being in construction, I think you always have overruns, and so you just need to be a realist about it. The last one, Hill Street, was a large overrun. We didn't get the locations done correctly, and we really got after the engineers in their part of that. And when we went down to Sunset, we made the point that if you don't get it right, we're going to do our job, and we will push back. So we have now a lawsuit in place to regain the $50,000 that was spent over the top, which added 22 days to that project. But aren't we fortunate to have that done before the snow flies? And I went down on the Monday that they laid the asphalt and on the west side and walked on that and congratulated the workers. And then the next Tuesday and just before council, I was down and they had just 4 or 5 loads to go. We're really fortunate that we have that 1 cent tax and that we can do those major requirements. We weren't going to take out the concrete in the intersection. It was all concrete. It was going to stay in the initial cost. And so those things change. And when they showed us the picture of what was underneath Sunset, it was amazing. So they do a good job. But we're trying really hard to keep control of those and push back.
Mr. Hancock.
I think the key is what the council already voted for, which is accountability. When there's things that are going on, like when we're working on we've got an area that we're working and something happens that's going to create a delay, and especially in the situation with Sunset, you've got to do what you can to keep people accountable. And that's what the city council voted to do. And I think that was the right call. When those things come up, we need to say, look, this shouldn't have happened this way. And that's just a part of what we have to do as the city, to say, look, if something is going to happen and you've created an issue, we need to keep you accountable. And that's exactly like Mayor Guard said. We're engaged in, or trying to be, figuring out, getting engaged in litigation for that.
Any follow-up?
Yes, I'd like to point out that in my recollection, we're the only ones that have done that, this council, that have pushed back and sued to see if we could recover that $50,000. And we'll continue to do that. That's our job.
Okay, Mr. Hancock, the next question is for you. What do you propose to do with the Tonkin Stadium property that the city will be taking over?
Sledding Hill. No, that's such a difficult question. I mean, you have so many things that you could do. The problem is the funding for it. You need to be able to have something that can be funded. What I would be very receptive to is what we have already in our city, which is people coming forward and saying, hey, I have this great idea. Let's build a skate park. I have this great idea. Let's get a splash pad. And I would be very open to, and I think that by no means should this be something where it's like the council and mayor just by fiat are going to be like, we're going to do this. I think we need to get people coming forward with ideas and different ways it can be used, and we go in that direction.
All right. Mr. Guard?
Ernie, we were supposed to keep that under our hat so we don't have to pay for the demolishing of that building ourselves. Yeah. So whoever wrote that question, you're in trouble. The state's going to pay for that building to come down, and the question is how far they're going to take it down. And I think we'd like to keep the bowl. The bowl has always been an attractive nuisance, and many of us have played in that attractive nuisance. And so there's good ideas. It's in the center of town. We want that to be a avenue of usage. So once again, if we had a big opportunity like UP or the interstate running through Riverton, we'd be able to get that back. But yes, we're gonna put that to good use.
Any follow-up, Mr. Hancock?
No, sir.
Okay, and the final question, Mr. Guard. Does or should the mayor's office have or develop a relationship with the leadership on the Wind River Indian Reservation?
Absolutely. And just today, Kyle called me and said, hey, Monday's a really busy day, but I directed him yesterday. They sent us a letter to invite us to do something on the 10th. We didn't get it till the 13th, and so call and apologize for that. So we're in the meeting Monday at 2. And in my administration, we've been in the meetings out in the Arapaho and the Shoshone tribes. We want a really good relationship with the tribe, and we need it. We are partners in that situation, and we're glad to be.
Mr. Hancock.
Ernie, could you tell me what your question was again? I want to make sure I don't miss any part of it.
Sure. Does the mayor's office have or develop a relationship with the leadership on the Wind River Indian Reservation?
Well, so what we typically have had on the council is we've had a tribal liaison, and that's an important role. I think we could do better at really making sure that we recognize, like I said, I don't want to say the same thing over and over again. The word today is not master plan for this one, but it is the idea that the rising tide raises all ships. We need to recognize the need to build partnership and to build an ongoing relationship with the tribes. And I think a big part of that is just making sure that we're talking with them, which I think Mayor Guard recognizes. But being willing to go out there, being willing to sit down, making sure that we are reaching out and not just waiting for them to come to us is essential. Yep. And so being able to come up with ideas and different ways that we can build together is, I think, the most important thing that we need to be working towards.
Any follow-up, Mr. Gerd?
Once again, we are doing it. I know of no previous administration that's been out to the councils. We have. We've gone 4 times. When you open the doors, they're just like us. They have their problems, and we can work together and make those work. I'm working right now to get the trash removed from in front of the Job Corps. I guess this doesn't want the Job Corps trash to go.
I think those things have timers on them.
I think it's a timer. Well, the green is still on, but I think it's a timer on.
Oh, it's a timer on the main set. Well, now we're going to go into a fun thing called the lightning round, okay? It's a one-word lightning round. Each candidate will be given a word or phrase and 15 seconds to respond. The next candidate gets a different word or phrase, and we'll have 15 seconds. And each candidate will be given a couple of these. So the whole idea behind this is to hear what associations each candidate makes when given a simple prompt. And Mr. Hancock, you're first. Jurisdictions.
Complicated. I guess the only thing I'll say about that is where we are with shared jurisdiction between the county and then the reservation, it does make things a little difficult with crime here.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, traffic patterns.
We
We need the microphone or the other one, huh?
We have the best quarter. We have the absolute best quarter in all of the state of Wyoming with Main Street and Federal.
Okay. Mr. Hancock, solid waste.
Expensive. No, I think we need to recognize and come up with ideas and ways that we can do better at not having a really big expense in terms of shutting down our landfill here soon.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, public art.
Oh, look at Main Street.
Okay.
Gorgeous picture that we have there. Absolutely wonderful. The art that was there before was great, but this is unbelievably good.
Okay, we have some questions now from the audience. This question asks or states, Riverton is full of exceptions to established city code and ordinances, roads without curbs, gutters, and sidewalks being the most obvious. If elected or re-elected, what are your feelings regarding these exceptions going forward? The short-term benefit is leaving a big problem for future citizens? Mr. Gard.
This is a code violation. Problems exist everywhere we go, and they have to be adapted. The one that comes to mind is in my neighborhood. We put in a school without a sidewalk. The road that my brother and I were responsible for has curbs and gutters on both sides of it. And so we just can't let that slip and go, but we've let that happen in many places, just like up on Sunset. The high school has no sidewalks. UPS has no sidewalks. We just can't put all that on one owner at a time. And so when we come back through and rebuild that street, which we will do, we'll have to make those things work. We have a grant in right now for almost $900,000 for a safe way to school to put that sidewalk in on that road. I gave the land to the city for that road to be in place. I love the asphalt. And so asphalt, if that's all we can get to start with, we'll take it. But eventually we'll have to get the sidewalks in place.
Okay, Mr. Hancock.
When we have development go on in the city, we need to make sure that we're keeping the feet to the fire when we're getting things built. We need to not allow these exceptions to occur as they have been. It turns into a dangerous situation for kids going to school down to Willow Creek. It turns into a situation where if you're walking around my neighborhood, you might have a sidewalk, you might not. And I think it really comes down to, as a city council, saying, if you're going to build, we need sidewalks. And we need to make sure that we keep to that. If we don't do that, we're not going to have them, period.
Follow up, Mr. Gard.
Yeah, I think Mr. Hancock was in the control of that for Majors and Monroe to get those sidewalks in when he was on the city council and chose not to push that. The state was the funder of that.
The next question is, and this will go to Mr. Hancock, do you think racism is a problem in Riverton? If yes, what are your thoughts and ideas on addressing the issue?
As much as we would like to say that we've developed as a community such that we never deal with racism, it's not true. It's a problem. Is it something that just causes absolutely terrible consequences? Yes. In terms of what we can do from a city council, all we can really do is lead by example. We can say, everybody in the city of Riverton, we welcome you and we want you here. And I think that's important. But the expectation that if you're going to break the law, anybody, whatever your race, you could be punished for it. And so I think we need to set the example. We need to show people that we really love the diversity that we have in our community, and we need to welcome it, and we need to embrace it. And then I guess the only other thing would be to make sure that we're being as fair as we can and making decisions on the basis of things that do not have to do with race when it comes to government decisions, which of course would be illegal and unconstitutional.
Mr. Gard.
This is a tough question, and it comes back around, and it will probably stay for a long time. But again, Monday morning at 10 o'clock, we will have a meeting with the Riverton Peace Mission. at City Hall. We have those currently going. We're doing our very best to curb that tide. There is a feeling that Riverton is a racist society. When I go out with the police officers late at night, I cannot tell you how impressed I am with our police, how kind they are to the people that they work with. And so I think as we set the example, we can change that the very best we can to be non-racist. And we're trying to do that. I think on every level, that needs to be accomplished.
Okay. We've reached the end of our allotted time, but you each will have 1 minute for a closing statement. Since we started with Mr. Guard at the beginning of the meeting, we'll start now with Mr. Hancock. 1 minute.
Thank you, Ernie. Well, I want to address two things that Mr. Guard brought up that are inaccurate. Number one, I was not on the council when Major was voted the way it is. I had nothing to do with that. I wouldn't have voted for that. When I was on the council, I did try to hold developer and the contractor accountable to make sure we did have sidewalk running along Sunset with the new Rendezvous Dental building there. That's important to me, and to suggest that I would let that slide, inaccurate. In terms of the zoning near where I live, my concern wasn't that I had a problem with multi-family dwellings near where I live. My concern was we're talking about a multi-family dwelling on Sunset where we have high school traffic, ambulance traffic, middle school traffic, college traffic, and just the difficulty that would create, and adding to the traffic, I think would make it so that just wasn't the best place for that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Guard, 1 minute.
Thanks, Ernie. I believe over the last 4 years, have set out the example that I have the experience to run the city of somewhere between a $26 to $36 million budget. I have that experience to do that. I have time to do that. I put a lot of time in. I have citizens call me at 5 minutes after 8 to come down and look at the squishy ground on Sunset. As I get there, we're able to call in the engineers and everybody, and they were ready to lay asphalt that day, and we stopped that and replaced that. And if I hadn't had that ability with the citizens to call to get me there and to make that decision to make that happen, that is how that happens. The sidewalks on Monroe from the property that we sold, the school approached us and said they wouldn't put in the other side. We said you would, and we got them done. And they are in place. And so the difference there is getting work done when it needs to be.
Well, thank you very much, the Honorable Richard Guard, the current mayor, and the Chief Deputy and Prosecuting Attorney, Tim Hancock. Thank you very much. Also, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to this event this evening. As a reminder, you can see the replay of this on wyotoday.com, YouTube, and on County 10. We thank you for coming, and we invite you to stay for the District 55 Forum, which is coming up in just a few minutes. Thank you for your attention, and good evening.
Excuse me. We'd like to get started with House District 55. If you'll all take your seats, you can take cookies, but sit down, please, so we can get started. Thank you.
Maryland. Yeah. Okay. I think we're ready.
I think so. Where's Linda?
I think so, yeah. Where did Linda go? Oh, do you have an introductory remark this time or not? Okay, very good. Well, we have two candidates running for House District 55. Current Representative Amber Oakley is running as a Republican. Bethany Baldus is running as a Libertarian. Again, this forum is being live streamed and recorded by WYO Today YouTube and County 10, and will be available on WYO Today, County 10, and the Fremont County League of Women Voters website. Now, for some of you who were just here for the mayor's debate, we have the same format, and that is we'll begin with each candidate having a prepared 2-minute opening statement. Then we'll follow with a number of questions submitted to and vetted by community members. Each candidate has 1.5 minutes to respond. When the candidate have 15 seconds remaining, Marilyn will raise an orange or red sign there. There she is. Thank you, Vanna. We will rotate the order of the respondents using a randomized computer program. In advance, thank you, candidates, for respecting the time limit here this evening. The next section will be a one-word lightning round. Each candidate will be given one word or phrase and 15 seconds to respond to that word. Candidates may give a one-word response or use as many words as they want to fill the 15 seconds. Each candidate will be given a total of 4 words. The idea with this round is to hear what associations each candidate makes when given a simple prompt. Following the lightning round will be the audience question round. The audience, you have index cards to write down your questions. These cards will be collected after the 3rd round of questions. Volunteers will review and select 2 questions for the audience question round. And again, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond. Finally, each candidate will have 90 seconds to present an unprepared closing statement. So I'm confident you're going to hear things tonight, as we did in the prior session, that will align with your thoughts and ideas, and some things you probably will disagree with. I'll ask the audience to refrain from reacting to any of the comments made by the candidates until the candidate session is over, so the candidates can focus on their message. Okay. We did not have a coin flip, did we? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Well, I tell you what, I started on this side last time, so we'll start on that side this time. So the first question is going to go to both candidates. You have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Ms. Baldus.
Thank you so much, Ernie, and thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Gosh, this has been a journey for Riverton, and my little experiment of running as a third-party candidate. I like to think back on where this all came from, where I started. And really, it's Riverton High School and being the pumpkin patrol in high school and learning what service is and what it is to serve the community. As I've gotten along and running for office, it hasn't been so much about running for office, but learning the community and learning my neighbors and everybody who makes up this town called Riverton. And it absolutely is mind-boggling the amount of time that you can spend going from one meeting to the next. But what happens when you go to those meetings is you actually get to hear what's going on in the community. You know when people have problems, you know when there's issues going on that maybe we don't hear in a public forum like City Council. I've been able to be on many boards throughout the last few years, to include CATS, which is the Children's Museum. Now I'm drawing a blank on them, but it's been said before that I'm just looking for titles. It's quite the opposite. I don't really care what the titles are that I'm holding. It's more about getting to be part of the community. Today, as I was driving down Main Street, I've noticed that there's been a few new signs pop up on our Main Street. People around the state think Riverton is disappearing. We're vibrant. We're more alive than we've ever been. The signs that are popping up, the businesses taking control of their outsides, everything. We've had 3 new businesses open up in the last 2 weeks through the chamber. We have another one this weekend. I'm here to tell you guys that Riverton is the future of Wyoming, that Fremont County is the future of Wyoming, and we have got to have somebody who is willing to go represent for the people and not so worried about politics. We've got to have somebody who's ready to fight for Riverton and be the voice for Riverton. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Ernie. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting and for all of you for being here. I'm Representative Ember Oakley, serving Riverton's House District 55 in the Wyoming House. For this introduction, the call of the question was, why do you want to run? And what I'd like to ask is, what can I do for you, the residents of Riverton and the Wyoming people? Our government is created to serve the people. So what is the role of a representative? The role of the state to our people. When I've been out talking to folks, there's one topic that keeps coming up and coming to the forefront, and that is about the state of our economy. And hand in hand with that, what people share is their frustration with a federal government who is not listening to the people and is implementing policies, quite frankly, that are damaging our country. People are both mad and afraid of the high inflation and the recession that we're either in or heading towards. Because Wyoming people believe in being fiscally responsible in their own lives and with their taxes. Wyoming can stand strong against this and implement policies that are helpful and good for the Wyoming people. So, for example, a big topic around the state, again, for the state issue that keeps coming up, is the sharp increase that we've seen in property taxes over the last couple years. So what can we do to make better policy for the people of Wyoming? I will work for you to create a more fair, a more sustainable structure that evens out these spikes so that will help maintain our quality of life here in Wyoming. Some other things that I've worked on for Riverton people at the state level, of course, having heard loud and clear the importance of the project of the hospital. I brought people together, important meetings, created legislation that led to critical funding to make our hometown dream a reality. And so we're going in front of the SLIB board early in November, so that's exciting. So I've been listening to you, I've been working for you, and I want to continue to serve you. So I ask for your vote to re-elect me on November 8th.
Okay, remember to look over here for the sign. Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right, the first question will go to Ms. Oakley. As an elected official, there is a never-ending learning curve and a wide range of subject matter that require a significant level of mastery. What skill sets do you possess that will assist you in representing the citizens of HD 55 appropriately?
I think that's an important question, because I think perhaps the most important thing that a legislator can do, and it sounds so simple, but it's actually in rare supply, is being a thoughtful legislator. There are so many topics that come in front of you. There's, of course, 10 standing committees, energy, transportation, education. I'm on the Judiciary Committee. There is a lot to learn, and it's ever evolving. What issues are going to be important for the state next year? They've already changed. It's been amazing. When I first ran and was elected in 2020, we were talking about, oil had gone to $0 a barrel, it flatlined. And we were looking at huge revenue deficits. And so we had to go do the work, and we cut $400 million. It had to be done. Some of it was painful. So the skill sets that you bring are being willing to do the hard work, dig in, understand the issues. There are complex issues. And there are some legislators that handle things in a simplistic manner. And that doesn't work either. So you have to bring critical thinking to your work as a legislator.
Okay. Ms. Baldes.
So I think the most important thing for any person walking into any forum in the political realm is making sure they have strong principles. If you have that guiding base of values set, it makes it easier to guide your path as the hard questions come up. And then beyond that, it's also knowing you don't always have to be the expert, and that there are experts within this room and within the state that you can reach out to get better information on the topics that you may not know about, and utilizing the tools around you, because we can't be an expert on everything, but we always have people around us that can help us guide our direction.
Any follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Ernie. And then, so finally, I bring something that's, I think, really important for a policymaker and a legislator, is that I have been in the practice and the study and in the practice of law for 16 years. And so I bring that experience to the legislature, and certainly to the Judiciary Committee. And those of us who are trained in the law are people who are looked up to, and they rely on our understanding of the law a lot. So I bring that.
Ms. Baldes, the next question is for you. The recent United States Census identified Wyoming's population grew the least amount among all Western states since the previous census. Additionally, Wyoming's gross domestic product declined. What is the sustainable future for Wyoming, where the population is largely static and attracting industry requires an available skilled workforce?
Well, that's a mouthful. I think their button has to be pushed. Someone's supposed to push a button. Okay.
There we go.
All right. So I think that the biggest thing that is facing Wyoming is something that we've all been talking about for a long time. We've had politicians sitting in front of us for as long as I can remember in my short or long life, telling us that this day is coming and it's upon us. As a real estate agent and being the chamber president, I have actually seen over the last year that people are coming to Wyoming for different reasons than they have in the past. People are coming here because they've experienced tyranny in other states. People are bringing their smaller businesses. They're maybe not the big cash cows Wyoming's always looking for, but they're the things that are going to sustain us into the tomorrow. We've got to have a budget that we can afford. We've got to have an audit on our budget so that we know that we can afford our budget in the future. And we have to make sure that when we're saying that we support oil and gas and coal, that we're actually supporting them and bringing them into our state, and not just looking at them as our main revenue source. Our family is an oil field family. It has been for the last 13 years. We found ourselves without a job in 2020, and we had to change our direction.
Ms. Oakley.
So I agree, obviously, when you're talking about the entire economy of a state, it's variable and it's complex. And it's something we talk about an awful lot in Wyoming. And I don't think there's not a silver bullet. We've talked about, of course, our community colleges are important in that. They have done a tremendous job at pivoting and being responsive, which is something I think community colleges can excel at. In career and technical education, they help build and sustain an educated and skilled workforce. So I think that's important. That's certainly something that I support, and our community colleges do a great job. We talked about economic development, the businesses that have come to Riverton in the last segment, and quite honestly, Riverton has some leaders in that. Idea Inc., we've brought manufacturing jobs, these businesses that we've discussed. And so what it is a never-ending task. And I think it's something we just have to continue to talk about and work towards. But from what I've seen, we do. Well, and I'll leave it at that without launching into energy. I don't have time.
Okay. Any follow-up, Ms. Baldas?
Energy will probably come up again. So I think that it's the change of education. One of the greatest days in Wyoming history was when they allowed our local colleges to start offering four-year degrees. This is bringing education to the families in our towns and our communities, and not just normal college degrees, but technical degrees.
Okay, Ms. Oakley, this question is for you. What changes, if any, would you make to the Wyoming tax structure to address the recent rise in property taxes? What changes would require a constitutional change?
So, I mentioned earlier being a thoughtful legislator, and I also mentioned specifically the property tax reform. And so certainly something that I plan on digging into and is being already addressed by, I think there's 6 bills that have already been proposed. So this is certainly something we're looking at, I think committed to, stopping the spikes and that creates the uncertainty with our taxes. I know one of them would be an exemption on the first $50,000 of the value of your home. There's a deferring the increase until you sell your house. But as you mentioned, there is, it's Article 15, Section 11, I believe. But it says that you can't create new classes. So you can't say something like, well, those of us who've lived here for 20 years, that's unconstitutional. And everything has to be assessed at its full value. So there are some constitutional issues that we'll just have to look at. I mean, it's possible we look at a constitutional change, but I also think there are several things being discussed. And again, it's going to require a thoughtful manner so that we don't have unintended consequences. Because again, the idea is we're trying to even it out, not to create a new problem by a knee-jerk reaction. So certainly something I'm committed to working on.
Ms. Baldas?
Here's the other, oil and gas and education. Our constitutional provision over education is absolutely stifling our legislature right now. Fremont County was one of the, I don't know if it was the only county, but our county assessors worked very hard to actually have a property tax decrease. They decreased the mills this year, and nobody felt it because assessments went so high. We can't control the market. The market is going to happen, but as long as education is, the constitutional provision is taught the way that it is and not defined by our legislature, we are absolutely tied by the hands of property taxes, and there's very little the state can do or the revenue committee can do at this point to change it, and we've got to have legislators who are willing to take that on.
Follow-up, Ms. Oakley?
Yes, I disagree with that, with that assessment. So your property taxes go to your county, and they do go to the education, to fund the education. That is true. But the idea that that's what's hamstringing us, I don't agree with. And there certainly are things that can be looked at. short of a constitutional amendment, not that I would be opposed to that if that's what's appropriate, but there are certainly measures that we can take legislatively.
All right, thank you. Well, audience, now it's your turn. Did you have any questions that you wrote? If so, please hold them up in the air for our folks to come around and collect them. We have, I know, at least one question. Anybody with a question, raise them up in the air so we can collect them and then have them for the audience participation part. Okay, looks like we've got them done. Okay, so the next question goes to Ms. Baldas. Do you believe that Wyoming women should have access to safe and legal abortion in cases where pregnancy is the result of rape or incest, the pregnancy is not viable, or the health of the woman is in jeopardy? Why or why not?
I know what it is to carry life, and I know what it is to lose life. My oldest was a twin, and my youngest was a triplet. I have 3 kids here today, and 3 in heaven waiting for me. As we navigate these waters of life, I highly recommend considering donating to organizations like Abba's House. The Wyoming State Legislature has already passed this law in the state of Wyoming. And at this point in time, we must wait for the Supreme Court of Wyoming to make the decision. The amount of time that will be spent on these types of bills in our legislation this year is staggering when we only have 45 days to deal with all of the important topics facing Wyoming right now. We must respect the decisions that have been made for our state already and legislation passed, and we must make sure that women have access when crimes are committed against them, and doctors need to be able to serve their patients in a way that the government cannot say yes or no. When we lost our triplets at 15 weeks, there was no government entity that had any place in our lives at that point in time and in that loss. This is a real thing facing real women. We can be pro-life and still support our citizens. We can be pro-life and still have compassion. Just stop wasting time fighting.
Ms. Oakley.
So I do support those exceptions. I voted for those exceptions of incest and rape in the bill that we passed. We did pass a trigger ban, is what it was called. And, you know, never in 50 years, there hasn't really been that significant of legislation because Roe v. Wade was in place. So it was considered, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, a constitutional right. So this year, in June of this year, that was reversed, as you all are aware, and in the Dobbs case. And what it said is that abortion is not a constitutionally protected right, and it's something that should be left to the states. I am a pro-life legislator, and I voted for pro-life legislation. And I can tell you that what I hear, again, I'm to be a representative, and what I hear, and I will say it plainly, is that I believe from talking to people that that's what my constituents want. And so therefore I am a pro-life legislator, and I received an award from the Wyoming Right to Life.
A follow-up, Ms. Baldas? No? All right. The next question goes to Ms. Oakley, and it is on election integrity. How do you view the state of our election integrity, especially here in Fremont County?
Well, that's an easy one for me. I believe that Wyoming elections were fair, were conducted with integrity. I think our clerks do an amazing job. And then to take that the next step, as you asked, Ernie, I think our elections here in Fremont County are and were conducted fairly. And, there were some complaints made around the state this year, even then. So what did they do? They investigated them. The Secretary of State looked at them, and he validated that the elections were sound. There were complaints or issues brought up, I guess, about maybe being hacked. We do not have internet-connected voting machines. Anyway, all the different issues that were looked at, and they were reviewed. It is important. It is important to people, and people are talking about this issue. And we should always continue to do that. Voting and election integrity is important, but we're doing that, and we're lucky. We live in Wyoming. They're as good here as anywhere.
Ms. Baldez.
Ernie, do I have 30 seconds or a minute?
You have a minute and a half.
Oh, wow. I can really go on about this then. No. So, as a libertarian and a third-party candidate, I will tell you 100% we have some issues in the state, but it's not where everybody is looking. We need fair elections. We need elections where people get to vote on voting day for whichever party they want to vote for. We need to stop trying to close people out of the voting polls and include people in the voting polls. After I lost in 2018, I got a call. I lost by 53 votes? 50? Yep. Okay. I was called by the executive director of the Libertarian Party, the national party, the big dog of the Libertarian Party, trying to talk me into a recount. I wasn't going to do that to the people of Riverton. I wasn't going to put the people in Fremont County up against that massive of a defeat, because I know it's important for people to believe in their elections. I know that it's important for people to understand that when they go in on voting day, that their votes have been heard. I was just asking Margie out front when I came in what the $10,000 was that the Fremont County, now my words are gone, but I was just asking her what the $10,000 they spent was, because somebody was asking me about it, and that's an important question. Why are we spending more money? People were concerned, and so they sent all of the ballots out this year and had another firm do them so that they knew that they were fair. That was an audit on their office. They self-audited themselves because they know that it's important. I don't know, in a state that 70% of people voted for Trump, I don't know where people are so worried about our elections being hacked. I think that the most important thing is for us to know that on election day we're doing what we're doing and what we're asked to do.
Any follow-up, Ms. Oakley?
I do have a quick follow-up in relation to voter fraud. I guess I neglected to say last time. So when there are cases of it, just so you know, then the clerk does bring them to the county attorney's office. And the cases that we've had, I just think this is kind of key. They have been like a felon voting, and some of those have actually been, I believe, accidental, whichever, but they said, I thought after 10 years I could vote. But not necessarily, I think, what people think of, like of collusion or something like that. So we have very, very little that has ever been brought forward as voter fraud, and none of like the collusive sort that I think people think of.
Okay, the next question goes to Ms. Baldez. Although, you're getting long questions. I don't know why this works out that way. Although the American Rescue Plan Act funds largely mitigated much of Wyoming's financial crisis connected to the Great Recession, it is clear that Wyoming's economy is dependent on the declining mineral industry. Given that humans are causing climate change, how would you advocate for Wyoming's future economic health, which may or may not include renewable energy?
That is a loaded one. Well, first of all, we all have to know as a libertarian that as we were getting those funds, I was shaking in my boots from the strings that we're going to be tied to with the federal government. I think a lot of Wyoming's issues come from the fact that we have not done a good audit on our budget. We have the same 7 individuals coming up with our budget, and whether they do a good job or not, because we're fortunate enough to have one of those members in our own county, whether they're doing a good job or not it's a very small, it's a huge part of everything that the legislators do, but very few people actually have a say for what's going on in our budget. It's very complicated. It's very complex for a normal citizen to understand. It's very complex for the legislators to understand, and we've just got to simplify it. We have to start looking for ways that we can disconnect ourselves from the federal government because it's costing us money. And I think that we have to make sure that we're actually supporting the oil and coal industry so that they can do the work that they need to do and bring the companies that want to come here to work and not just using them as our cash cow.
Ms. Oakley.
So at the risk of taking 5 minutes, would you reread me the question?
Although the American Rescue Plan Act funds largely, although those funds largely mitigated much of Wyoming's financial crisis, it is clear that Wyoming's economy is too dependent on the declining mineral industry. Given of climate change, how would you advocate for Wyoming's future economic health, which may or may not include renewable energy?
I see several questions in there, and that's why I wanted you to reread it, because one of the things I'll start with is taking exception with sort of the premise of the question, which is leaning towards that renewable energy is the way. Okay, so when we're addressing climate issues, if you look, start at the U.S. level, look at what our U.S. House did. They proposed the Green New Deal. It's not sustainable, and it's not even attainable, and it doesn't at all talk about that most forms of green energy that are proposed are not competitive with carbon-based energy, and certainly not on a global scale. So interestingly, the federal government and government needs to get out of the way. We are still, as you said, highly dependent on carbon-based and our extractive energies and industries, and we need to support them. So rather than just cede that ground, for example, as I talked about the Green New Deal and looking at like India and China that continue to burn coal. And so it's our own government that is stopping Wyoming coal from going much cleaner coal from getting to those markets. So I don't think that the answer of our future is renewable energy. Certainly worthy, but do I think that's the answer for our economy? No.
And any follow-up, Ms. Baltus?
I did forget one thing. I think that it's important when new energy sources like uranium and whatever else may come are in our realm, because we don't know what might come. We need to make sure that the government is not giving them exceptions to the rules and allowing them to be part of the free market.
This question is for Ms. Oakley. The Wyoming Education Association is suing the state legislature for failing to fund public education adequately. The legislature has ignored the requirement for recalibration and cost of living adjustments. How would you approach funding public school education?
So I think Wyoming education is well funded. I disagree with the Wyoming Education Association suit, and I think it's at best a distraction, at worst absolutely bad for Wyoming for us to be taking and suing each other, and I don't think it solves the problem. Our education is actually one of the most insulated budgets that we have. When I talked about in 2020 when we had to do those cuts, for that year, it was on an immediate basis, and education was the one that was insulated. Because we do have a constitutional, which is why everybody sues, but we have a constitutional mandate to have adequate and equitable funding. And the state works very hard on it, pays a lot of money for consultants, does recalibration, and we have rural schools, and they still get quality education in this state. And it's important that we work together. And like I say, I'm very disappointed about that direction. But I don't think that, therefore, I'm going to take them at their word that it's inadequately funded, because from having worked in the legislature and looked at these budgets, education's important, but it's prioritized in Wyoming.
Yeah. Ms. Baldus?
I think the most important thing is going to be defining what that exactly means for the constitutional provision. Education in Wyoming is simple. The money needs to follow the student. We have had our students in homeschooling. We've had our children in homeschooling. We have them in a private school, and we have them in public education. They get different education at all the places, and guess what? It's all quality, but it all has its pluses and minuses. The money should follow our students as we choose as parents what the best place for our students to go. I think that Wyoming is a great place, especially with the size of our communities and our rural areas, that we could have some different options that would fit our communities better than the brick and mortars. And we have to be open to that so that our students are getting quality education, and the money, and as the budget gets bigger and bigger, because education is going to get bigger and bigger, our public schools also have the resources that they need. I know that there was a quote of, last year about following federal money instead of state money, because they don't know how much state money is going to be there. That's terrifying. We've got to get this under control so that our state schools can teach our children here in the state.
Follow up, Ms. Oakley?
Yes, so specifically as it goes to that, the follow the student funding idea that wherever you go, if you went to a different school, you can say, well, students get $17,000 in Riverton, so I want $17,000, I think is unsustainable. As we just discussed, it's highly expensive in rural places, which is all of Wyoming, to educate students, but we do it. But sometimes it might be $25,000, $26,000. That goes towards fixed costs. If we then still had to maintain that school, but then they each got to say, but I want my $25,000 and I want to go somewhere else, that would exacerbate the funding issues that we have for education in Wyoming.
Next question is for you, Ms. Baldus. Currently, 22,000 Wyoming citizens do not have medical insurance, and there is a 50-50 split with the federal government to cover Medicaid. Given the high cost of health care and the Medicaid expansion estimate that Wyoming will pay about $9 million to the $68 million that the federal government will pay, why are you for or against Medicaid expansion in Wyoming?
You did give this to the libertarian, huh? I shake in my boots anytime I hear us tying ourselves tighter to the federal government. The money is there right now, and it's one of those things that could be, we could be saddled with that bill in the future without anything that we have done. I think that this comes to the bigger conversation of how are we going to solve this problem. We have a very real problem with rural health care in this state, and we've got to come up with real solutions that are going to serve the people of Wyoming. If the legislature is never going to vote for Medicaid, what is the solution? I know that in Riverton, we've worked so hard to work towards our new hospital, and that those are the projects. This isn't the only one around the state. There's one in Carbon County and one up in the northern part of the state. These projects are real, and they're going to bring real access to towns. We also have to write legislation that allows doctors to practice across the borders. Right now, it's very tight in Wyoming, and we've got to be part of the surrounding states where there are more doctors.
Ms. Oakley.
So Medicaid expansion is a difficult topic. I think we all recognize that, and it's one that's highly divided. People are strongly for or strongly against, but I believe that's warranted. There are serious considerations, I believe, on both sides. I voted for Medicaid expansion in 2021, and these are the reasons why. So it would infuse about $60 to $70 million into our general fund, assuming the FMAP right now is about at 60%. So that's a federal match that the feds would pay the 60%. Those are federal dollars, tax dollars, that they're giving other states that we're refusing. And And the reality is, at that level, it very well might be able to pay for itself, including the economic benefit that it would bring to our community, that literally it might pay for itself. But here's the key. It helps Wyomingites that are in need of it. This is people who are from 19 to 65. They qualify if they're 0 to 138% of poverty level. So what's commonly said is this is our working poor. I received a call from a woman yesterday who called and said, I can't afford and I really need this. These are real people. But just, I see I'm getting close. But I do understand the reluctance. I do. Doing a deal with the federal government just often feels like you're signing up with the devil, and it's not something that we get to tailor. It's either join or don't. And so I do understand the hesitation, but on balance, I support it.
And any follow-up, Ms. Baldus? Okay, the next question is going to Ms. Oakley about community college education. Wyoming's 8 community colleges serve all 23 counties and play a significant role in educating non-traditional and adult students, while at the same time training employees and building a competitive workforce. Current funding is mainly through the general fund. The primary challenge facing these colleges is sustainable funding. And here's the reality. The state currently contributes 51% of total funding within the state aid block grant. Student tuition contributes 27%, and local mill levies contribute 22%. Budget erosion for the community colleges since 2010 amounts to $94 million. What ideas do you have to make our community colleges sustainable?
So, as I've said, of course, I certainly recognize the value of our community colleges, and they really do help build and sustain our workforce. And therefore, it's of value. That's what trains the workers that can drive our economy. I served on the Wyoming Community College Commission, and because of that, I work well with the commission and the community colleges. And I brought an amendment actually to the budget bill this year that brought critical funding to all the community colleges, and including CWC. But when you're talking about a longer term, there are a couple ideas. I think I went. Stop her timer. Yeah, especially me. I'll keep going. Just keep talking. I'm just waiting. They said wait to turn. Oh, there I am. Yeah. I'm live. So there are a couple of ideas. Again, that's for the state and the people of the state to discuss. One could be an increase in tuition for out-of-county students. And one of the reasons that was read into the question that's really key to understand is that, so there's 8 community colleges, so the mills are only paid by those 8 counties. So like Fremont County has a mill for CWC, but we have a campus, a great culinary campus in Jackson, for example. Teton County doesn't pitch in and doesn't pay a mill. Same with Hot Springs County. So we make sure, the community colleges make sure that they cover the entire state, but the mills and the actual tax burden are only on the residents within that town. So that leads to the second idea that certainly has been discussed and might look at it. I think Teton County would probably willingly give it to us, which would be a great boon for us. But that would be evening that out, which is 23 counties benefit from the Wyoming community colleges and 23 counties pitch in their taxes.
Ms. Baldus.
Can you repeat? I'm just kidding. No, I think that one of the things that's been so impressive about CWC is they've been nimble and they've been changing the product that they offer. I remember going to a meeting in the past where they had just changed their goal to being graduation, and I remember sitting there thinking, shouldn't that have always been the goal? They have so many things going on up there that are really giving people the opportunity locally to have careers in technical fields. for instance, our cosmetology program, you can choose to go get a license or you can choose to get a business degree. But both are education and both are getting people out in our communities working locally. I think that for sustainability, it's probably the biggest issue of the budget that we've been talking about all along. It's the same conversation that legislators have been having for a long time, but we've got to actually look at something different and start making the changes that need to be made.
Any follow-up, Ms. Oakley?
No, thank you.
All right, very good. The next question goes to Ms. Baldes. In Wyoming, the current wage gap between men and women is 65 cents, the largest gap in the United States. That means for every dollar a man earns, a woman earns only 65 cents. Another way to look at this gap is that Wyoming women basically stop getting paid on August 29th every year. Do you see this as a problem? If so, what could you do to eliminate this disparity?
I think that Wyoming should coin the term opportunity gap instead of wage gap. I chose to be a stay-at-home mom for 11 years. One of the reasons that we chose to have the family structure that we chose to have was so that if anything ever happened with my husband's job in the oil industry, we would have a backup plan. 2020 came, we didn't have a job. I was able to go get a career without us having to upset everything was upset, but without us having to lose our house, lose our vehicles, and so on. I think that the opportunity gap in our community comes at a price. It comes at us losing our men. Our men are one of our biggest exports to our towns. We lose this in our communities and raising our children, and we aren't doing anything to fight to keep them here and give them opportunities. It's taken my husband 2 years to find a job in town that can sustain us enough and have a little bit of financial support. This is a real problem happening to all of our families in this state, and it's one of the reasons why we have a decline in our population, because people just can't afford to stay here, live here, and have both parents be with their families.
Ms. Oakley.
The wage gap is brought up a lot in Wyoming, and to be honest, I'm always hesitant to attribute that gap to political reasons, which is certainly why it's being discussed here, I think, or even cultural reasons, that we're backwards and the women don't get paid or something. Because I just don't think that culturally that's true. So I think one of the things that you see is that we have jobs that are well paid for men that a lot of times men take, which let's talk about the energy industry. I don't know the numbers, but I think probably significantly outnumbered by men, and they're good paying jobs, and the reality is that women can go do them, and that would be great, but if they choose not to do them, then I think that attributes to this gap. But, I would say when you take a route like I went and got a law degree and have been practicing law for 10 years and over 10 years, but I'm not paid less than my male counterpart. And I think that that's true. I would say there's a couple things that I've seen that I think are great, as far as maybe culturally pushing it and accepting it. Like at the community colleges, they're encouraging women to, take our truck driving, take our, you can drive big equipment, and seek out a higher paying job. So I think those opportunities are there.
Any follow-up, Ms. Baldes? Okay. This is our last question, and it goes to Ms. Oakley. Given Wyoming's vast public lands, what are your priorities for public access to public land versus the development of public land's non-renewable resources?
I'm sorry, did you say specifically in relation to?
Yeah, given Wyoming's vast public lands, what are your priorities for public access to public land versus the development of public land's non-renewable resources?
Well, as far as public lands go, I am and will always be, and I think Wyomingites are, a strong advocate for multiple use. So, 50% of our revenue from our state comes from extractive industries, which are largely come from public lands. And then, of course, recreation is huge for Wyomingites and having that access. And that's something that I think every Wyomingite would always agree with and push for. I'll be honest. I'll try to get on board and get behind the renewable energy sector, but driving into Cheyenne, I lived in Laramie when I went to law school, and now I drive to Cheyenne, and they have these red lights on them, and as you're driving into Cheyenne, the whole hill is just littered with these the wind turbines, and then they have red flashing lights. It looks awful. I know they've been damaging to wildlife, certainly to birds, and then we don't have a real good solution. It seems like a lot of them end up in landfills. So I guess in the end, my answer to that is that we need to be real honest on the costs of these different forms of renewable energy and how much they're bringing us. I think solar brought in $2.5 million. Again, when you're talking about an energy industry that's brought in millions to billions of dollars to Wyoming. So that's a long, wandering answer. I support good quality use of public lands, and I will keep asking questions as far as the wind turbines.
Ms. Baldes.
Can you repeat that one, actually?
Yeah, sure. Given Wyoming's vast public lands, what are your priorities for public access to public land versus the development of public land's non-renewable resources?
As Wyomingite, we do enjoy to use our public lands, and it should stay that way. I guess the best way to answer that question is we've got to look at the federal government to actually pay us out for our federal lands and the renewable resources that they're taking off of it, or the money coming back to our state. I had these numbers a lot better in my head before, but they take so much out of the states that have public lands, that have renewable resources, and only a small fraction of that money actually comes back to our state. So I think it comes back to looking at the federal government and how much money they're stealing to Wyoming so that we can have more sustainable budget here. And yeah.
Okay, follow up, Ms. Oakley.
I guess I'll just finish kind of the thought that I was going towards, which is, as we do this, I think certainly when it is public lands, we need to be real honest about the tax structure, what are they bringing in to the people versus the costs, because I think there is a significant one there, and we're not bringing in a lot of revenue from it.
Okay, we do have some bonus questions, and Ms. Baldes, you'll go first. Early childhood education gives children, especially low-income families, the skills ready to begin kindergarten. Do you believe in universal funding for early child care and childhood educational programming? Why or why not?
So is this punishment for being fast? So I have to say that we have very good resources in our communities at this point in time from what I've experienced with early childhood. I know that in Fremont County, this is a priority, and through programs with CDS and so on, there's a lot of options and opportunities around the state.
Okay, Ms. Oakley?
So I guess I would separate that into two things. So you talk about early childhood education funding. As far as like funding education for very young children, I do not support that. I don't think that's the state's role. I think that's parents and families. But I do think there's a difference there if we're talking about needing intervention, needing help. We fund about $35 million to support CDS for children with developmental delays, things like that. When there's an actual need that is identified and addressed, then I can support that, and we do. But as far as taking it back, so basically getting into childcare so people can go to work, I don't think that is the role of Wyoming government.
All right. Ms. Baldes, follow up?
No.
Okay. Another bonus question here, Ms. Oakley. Of all Wyoming counties, Fremont County is most acutely affected when it comes to ambulance and life flight services, as well as trained volunteer staff. Funding from the American Rescue Plan Act allowed local ambulance service to continue. How should we fund local ambulance service post ARPA funding?
Boy, I think we recognize that this is an issue, emergency medical services, and it absolutely has been difficult for Fremont County. We send more life flights than the next 5 counties combined. So emergency services are getting ridiculously expensive for the individuals in Fremont County, and then of course that comes back to us collectively and as a community. And then on top of that, rural health care is expensive to deliver, all that stuff. Little plug here. I think one of the ways is to have quality rural health care available where you're at, which is exactly what we're looking to address with the Riverton Medical District, the new hospital, and they're partnering with the Billings Clinic, which is partnered with the Mayo Clinic, which is specifically designed to try to say, how can you deliver as much care as possible in the location where the person is, so that the emergency doesn't mean everything has to go out of county, out of state. So we are addressing that, and I think this community is very aware of that and of the issues. And we've had enough problems with figuring out local ambulance services. I'm going to wait for my next segment.
Okay. Ms. Baldes.
I think it's really hard to look at this as a statewide issue because all of the communities throughout the state are different. We have to be nimble and make sure that our counties have the access to what the answer is for their county. Fremont County is very different than Laramie County or Albany County, and we have different needs. I think that it also is one of the side effects of having something paid for so much by the government, that the free market has been taken out of these kinds of options. I think that it's going to make a difference when we do have a new hospital and have local access, because we aren't going to have as many life flights. We experienced a life flight 3 or 4 years ago, and it was $130,000 on an instant decision that we had to make. The legislature has made progress in this kind of access to people by allowing them to have the life flight plans again within our communities. It's very difficult because we obviously have to have ambulances. We have to make sure we have firemen. We have to make sure we have our police. So how do we pay for those things when we have the heavy load of education and UW and everything else on top of us, on top of 92 municipalities?
Okay, Ms. Oakley, you can finish your thought now.
Yeah, I've decided against launching into a whole new subject and trying to cram it in 30 seconds.
All right, thank you very much. And finally, in tribal relations, and this question goes to Ms. Baldes. What does the ideal relationship between the Northern Arapaho Business Council and the Eastern Shoshone Business Council and the state legislature look like? And what are the building blocks of a collaborative system?
This is a beautiful question. I have always thought it would be, I get super frustrated every census that we have to gerrymander our entire state to be able to make sure that there's a voice for everybody in our state. I think that it's important to have that voice in our legislature, and I think that there's an interesting model in the federal government that one thing I want to take from the federal government, and have liaisons in Cheyenne speaking for the tribes. I think that it's important to remember that they have their sovereignty, and that that we need to take that as a state and understand the importance of the tribes and our neighbors.
Thank you, Ms. Oakley.
So I guess I can't say what I would say that what the ideal relationship looks like, but I think it's something that we all know if you've lived in Fremont County for a long time. The communication and the efforts at collaboration are just always ongoing. And that's what has to happen. And what it takes is asking this question so that we do focus on it, we do prioritize it. And I've seen those efforts in the legislature. There's a tribal relations committee. I know Representative Larson sits on that, and I make sure to go or either watch one or the others. I meet with tribal leaders. You know, having been a Fremont County, lifelong Fremont County, my dad was from Fremont County. This is our community. Sometimes I just even bristle at the language. What do they want? What do we want? How can we communicate? Great friends, including sitting here in this room, that do great things for making sure that the tribal communities are heard and are just a part of the community. It is important that it connects to the legislature because that's the state level, and it's not just a local or a Fremont County issue. So, of course, all I can say is just continued and never-ending efforts at collaboration and communication.
All right, thank you. Any follow-up, Ms. Baldus? All right, very good. Well, now we go to the fun part, the lightning round, or the one-word lightning round. Each candidate will be given a word or phrase in 15 seconds to respond. The next candidate will be given a different word or phrase and will have 15 seconds to respond. We don't want to go 15 minutes, let me assure you that. All right, each candidate will be given 4 words. The idea is to hear what associations each candidate makes when given a simple prompt. And Ms. Oakley, you're first. Change.
Change, something that people tend to back away from and resist, but is nonetheless something that happens every day, something we can embrace and make for the better.
Ms. Baldus, collaboration.
Collaboration starts with communication and is incredibly important in our everyday.
Ms. Oakley, employment.
Employment, something I recommend. It makes paying your bills easier. Clearly important. We've talked a lot about economy, important for the sustainability of our state.
Ms. Baldus, disparity.
I might just be quiet on that one. Disparity. I don't got nothing for you, Ernie.
Okay, all right. We'll go to Ms. Oakley. Culture war.
Culture war?
Yeah.
I guess what that makes me think of is the federal level, what we're dealing with a very strong divide in our country. We tend to think R versus D. But I think, as we've said many times, working together is the only way, rather than calling ourselves at war, trying to understand different people.
Ms. Baldus, discrimination.
Discrimination looks different for a lot of people, and I think that it's just making sure that we're loving our neighbors, and that is what we're asked to do.
Ms. Oakley, tribal sovereignty.
Tribal sovereignty is very, very important because, as we just discussed, it's very, very important to our tribal neighbors. It's something that is granted in jurisdictionally and is important for them culturally. I just said them, and something that should be respected.
Ms. Baldus, law enforcement.
Essential for our communities
Okay, we have a question from the audience, and we'll go with Ms. Oakley first. There is a lot of cryptocurrency bills up for consideration in the next session. For example, a bill to establish a state stable coin. Would you support legislation that seeks to regulate and implement cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin?
Of course, you'd ask me this question because, crypto is not that easy to understand. And so it makes you a little reluctant when you're voting on bills, because I have. We've got some good people that I rely on to give me the information, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have an in-depth understanding of cryptocurrency. But as to the question saying, would I vote to I think regulate, and there was something else. Absolutely, this is happening right now. It is a part of our financial world, and so just because it is something that's foreign to some people doesn't mean you can stick your head in the sand and not be a part of it. So in fact, Wyoming was the first to charter cryptocurrency and brought some big players and some big money players to our state. So we are going to continue, I think, and I support that, to create a legislation so that this financial system is something that's regulated and fair.
Ms. Baldus.
I think that it's one of those things that to just say that I would support regulation without knowing what the type of regulation is a hard, open-ended question to answer. I think that it is one of it would be important to go to leaders within the community to be able to know what kind of things would be appropriate and not. I think that we need to be careful not to pigeonhole ourselves into too much regulation like we tend to do as government.
Okay. Now, any follow-up on that?
There is a quick follow-up. It's actually really important that we structure it with legislation, because that's what draws people in to be able to be a part of it, because it's without the governmental parameters of it, it would be like the dark web or something. Like, in order for it to be a safe, secure system, it takes those boundaries and that structure, and that's what we're leading the way in.
Well, it's now time for the closing statement for each candidate. And Ms. Baldus, you went first at the beginning of the program, so Ms. Oakley, you get to go first with your 2-minute closing statement, please.
Oh, 2 minutes. I don't know if I've got that much to say. We'll see.
Or less.
I guess I'd just like to say we've obviously discussed a variety of topics here today. It does take knowledge and experience to be an effective legislator for you. As I've said, I came into this with significant experience and knowledge of the law, and I've been putting that to work. I think I reflect the people of Riverton from being a community member and talking to people in the district. That includes being a conservative and Republican. For example, we've talked about budgets, but I don't think I've said this. We passed the leanest budget that has been passed in over a decade this past session in 2021. And when I'm talking to people from Riverton, that's something they appreciate, being fiscally conservative with their dollars. I've worked with groups that are important to Riverton, as I've said, including the Riverton Medical District and CWC, and brought legislation that brought critical funding for our new hospital, which is certainly something that is sort of our hometown dream. That's the perfect example of taking something that I represent Riverton, but I work on the state level, and that brought it all together. So I think that's important. Again, I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and I will continue to build relationship and again put all of this together for you so that you in Riverton can have the absolute best representation in the state.
Ms. Baldus, 2 minutes.
It is agreed on all sides that power properly belonging to one of the departments ought not to be directly and completely administered by either of the other departments. James Madison, Federalist Paper 48, Article 2 of the Wyoming Constitution. The powers of government divided into 3 departments, the legislative, executive, and judicial. I and no persons or collections of persons charged with the exercise of power properly belonging to one of the departments shall exercise any power belonging of the others. Tonight we've been here and we've heard beautiful debate. And the question now is, what do we choose to do? Do we have a bush for our government in Fremont County? Do we have it all in one office? Or do we make a tree of our government? Do we let our prosecutors write law? Do we let our prosecutors say whether or not our judges get raises on the Judicial Committee? Do we let our legislators, do we let our mayor be in charge of the chief of police in a police shooting? What happens when we're prosecuted successfully with a felony and our mayor or our representative has just taken away our voting right? These are all serious questions that every person in Riverton needs to be asking themselves. These are both incredible people. But where is the Constitution? This is not a fight between myself and my opponent in the mayor's race. It is a fight between the Constitution.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Fremont County League of Women Voters, WYO Today Media, and County 10, I want to thank these candidates for their participation here tonight and in this election. It is humbling to hear how much each of you is invested in our community. I asked the audience earlier to hold their applause, and I would like to welcome the audience now to give these candidates your appreciation. One final word as you exit this evening. Please consider completing the League of Women Voters electronic survey that can be accessed through the QR code back on the table. We're very interested in your feedback about the forum, about this forum, the election and voter guides. Thank you very much.